Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome into Dino Class once again. I hope we're all having a good weekend so far, and we had a good week. As you can see, I picked up a new model. Ark ported over the Loki Ceratops baby, so we're gonna be chilling in this for a hot minute now. Hello, baby Loki. Yes. Worst dinosaur? I don't think there's any dinosaur that is the worst. I mean, I've got gripes and vendettas with certain genera, but, I can put those aside and say that there is no objectively worst dinosaur. Actually, hold on. I might take that back. I remember seagulls being really annoying. But, okay, so maybe seagulls. But everything else, we're chilling. But yeah, we love Baby Loki. Yes. We love Baby Loki, right? Dinosaur equivalent to a sunfish. I don't think there's any dinosaur that ever adapted to certain things like the sunfish has. But if I had to pick one, I suppose if any animal would, it would probably be a large sauropod of some kind. I highly doubt a sauropod filled the same kind of niche as a sunfish, but it's big enough. I suppose you could lose a few pounds of skin and flesh, and yeah, sunfish are also objectively very strange. So yeah, what was the first dino to live? The first dinosaur that we have record of is a dinosaur called Nyatasaurus. Now, Nyatasaurus has been proposed to be the last common ancestor of all dinosaurs. And physically speaking, looking at its traits, yeah, you can kind of see it. There's a lot of traits in that animal that are very much present in a lot of later, families of dinosaurs. Is it actually the last common ancestor of all dinosaurs? I highly doubt it. I doubt that we will ever find the true last common ancestor of all dinosaurs, simply because of how rare that animal would have been to fossilize. Simply because, when dinosaurs first arrive on scene on Earth, they are Oh, okay. Hold on. Sorry. Had a bit of a technical difficulty there, but we are okay. Anyway, when dinosaurs first appear on Earth, they are outnumbered by a lot of other animals. They are outnumbered by things like the Rausuchians, the Pseudotsuchians, stuff like that. A lot of the early crocodiliforms, stuff like that. And it's not until much later in the Triassic that they become the more abundant life forms in the terrestrial ecosystems. So I highly doubt we'll ever find the first ever dinosaur, but we've gotten pretty close, I would argue. So yeah. If you watch Chaos Theory Season 4, I am in the middle of it right now. I'm liking it so far. I have not finished it, so no spoilers yet. You talk about Nanotyrannus for the next 30 minutes. Not for the next 30 minutes, but I will say that I will defend myself and my position on Nanotyrannus by saying that with the evidence that we had at the time, Nanotyrannus was 100% a juvenile T-Rex. That is how, 80 to 85% of the paleontologists felt about it. You go to every single paleo creator on this on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, and I guarantee you they've talked about it, and I'm willing to bet a lot of those people, a good chunk of them, were genuinely surprised, because the wider consensus was that it was a juvenile T-Rex. This is literally ground Nanotyrannus becoming valid is the equivalent of someone walking into a cave and coming back out with an actual dragon. That is how shocking that was. So yeah. Who do you think is bigger, Quetzal or Hats? Quetzal's probably taller, Hats might be heavier. They're built for different things and lived in different ecosystems. Hats had the ability of getting bulkier simply because it was kind of uncontested with where it lived, because it was hunting on an island where a bunch of the animals suffered from insular dwarfism. I say suffered, but it's just an adaptation, which basically made everything smaller. So hats being able to like island hop kind of left it like really uncontested in that ecosystem. Meanwhile, Quetzal in North America had to compete for food with dromaeosaurids, troodontids, tyrannosaurs, stuff like that. They had a lot of competition. So if they had bulked up as much as hats did, probably wouldn't have served them very well if they were like, I don't know, trying to get away from a predator. And also, hats was just bulkier because it was hunting things like hadrosaurs. Again, smaller hadrosaurs, but still stuff like that. Whereas Quetzal would go for like smaller animals, like the baby hadrosaurs and the baby ceratopsids and stuff like that. Is it true that T-Rex had feathers? Yes, but not how you think. T-Rex was probably about as feathered as an elephant is hairy. Elephants have hair, but they don't have a lot of it. So T-Rex was feathered, but probably not a lot. All around most dangerous dinosaur, the intelligence, power, strength, etc. That really depends on how you're looking at it. Most dangerous to a human or most dangerous to what they are hunting. Because you're going to get different answers relative to, like, what you're asking. If you're talking about relative to a human, literally anything that is between the range of 600 to 7 tons. 600 pounds to 7 tons. Anything around that range is lethal. In terms of intelligence, you can't really determine intelligence from extinct animals. Yes, you can like look at the brain case, you can come up with estimations on neuron count and all of that, but functionally, you can't honestly 100% guarantee an animal's intelligence if you don't have a living specimen of it. Like crows are very intelligent, and they're dinosaurs. So there is a basis for like reptiles and modern dinosaurs being intelligent, but it's impossible to know with like anything else. Now, personally, I think megaraptors are freaky. So I would give the title of most dangerous dinosaur to the megaraptors simply because most of them are within that size range I just said, and they also have the ability to pronate their wrists and have these massive claws. So that would be my personal answer, but if you ask anyone else, you're probably going to get a different answer. So when is the Spino paper coming out? No one knows. That's the thing. We hear a lot about papers before they come out. And with Spinosaurus especially, this is a very big paper and it is going to take a lot of time. I highly doubt the paper, like right now, what I would think is happening is that the paper is going through scrutiny at the moment. They are currently sending it to peers in the paleontology sphere, and they are getting it looked at. They're getting it just saying if their claims can be validated or pushed back on, and that's kind of where we're at this point. That's where I think that paper is right now. Now, I don't honestly know that. I can't guarantee you that's where the paper is. So the paper could be out tomorrow, or it could be out in 3 years. Who knows? It'll be out when it comes out. No one knows. Aside from the people who are working on it, I suppose. But yeah. Please talk about the Brazilodon. Brazilodon. That's a name I haven't seen before. Zilodon. What is this? Ah, here we go. Brazilodon was a small, extinct mammal-like... from Brazil in the late Triassic, about 225 million years ago. It is considered one of the oldest relatives of mammals and is known from its descendant, meaning that it has one set of tooth replacements. Very interesting. So this animal, if I had to guess about this animal, and I'm going to double check it right now, it would be a monotreme, right? Is it a monotreme? It doesn't actually say, but it does say that it is a mammalomorph. Very interesting. So that would be one of the first early mammals. So there's a good chance that, well, no, I'm not going to say that we descend from that, because that would probably be inaccurate, because evolution doesn't work like Pokemon, but that is probably one of our earliest relatives. Of course, you can go even further back with like the synapsids, things like Dimentrodon, the Gorgonopsids, and the Dicraeosaurs are a different thing. But yeah. Um, do 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 do. Let's see. Why isn't the mosasaur a dinosaur? Because it's a lizard. Dinosaurs aren't lizards. Their name might translate to terrible lizards, but technically the name saur doesn't actually mean lizard. I mean, it can in certain contexts, but it doesn't always. It can also mean reptile or snake, right? It kind of depends on the context of where the word's placed, I think. Anyway, mosasaurs are squamites. They are a part of the lineage that gives you things like snakes and lizards and stuff like that. Whereas dinosaurs are a part of a group called Archosauria, which gives us dinosaurs, birds, crocodiliforms, and a lot of other like pterosaurs and stuff like that. So mosasaurs are not dinosaurs because they are lizards, and dinosaurs are not lizards. What do you think of Jurassic World Evolution 3? I have really enjoyed it, and especially, as you can see, I am wearing the baby Loki-Ceratops from Jurassic World Evolution 3, so I'm a big fan of it. It's very fun to play. Talk about plesiosaurs. Plesiosaurs are about the same thing as the mosasaurs, right? Though I'm not confident in where they're placed, but I just know that they're not archosaurs. Plesiosaurs, and by extension pliosaurs, who are an offshoot of them, are not dinosaurs even slightly. I think they are more closely related to turtles. They're very strange. Now, pliosaurs, the big ones like Liopleurodon, like the magical Leopleurodon, as well as things like Kronosaurus, Sachikosaurus, stuff like that. Those guys are very abundant in the Jurassic. Whereas once the Cretaceous rolls around, pliosaurs are, I think it is currently believed that they are outcompeted by mosasaurs and slowly dwindle into extinction. Whereas plesiosaurs actually continue to exist throughout the rest of the Mesozoic, only really going extinct at the end Cretaceous mass extinction event when the asteroid lands in the Yucatan. So plesiosaurs stay very abundant. And in fact, there's a lot of very interesting things that happens with these marine reptiles. There's certain theories that suggest they would have started giving live birth instead of laying eggs like other reptiles. There's obviously some of them lived in colder climates, so they probably had a very blubbery-like thing around their bodies. So they were probably a lot thicker than their skeletons would suggest. But yeah. So, yeah, they're really cool. Tell me something about that winter T-Rex looking dinosaur. I forgot the name of it. Well, there are two animals that come to mind when you say that. It is either Nanooksaurus or Eutyrannus. Now, Nanooksaurus I'll talk about first because that's my favorite dinosaur of all time. Nanooksaurus hoaglandii. It is an Alaskan tyrannosaur. It is one of the furthest known northern dinosaurs that we know of so far, and it is from a formation called the Prince Creek. Now, it lived around the end of the Cretaceous, but unfortunately, we don't actually have a good idea of, like, what its, like, time range was, because we only have one specimen of it. And I'll give you guys a little bit of a key to go off of. If you ever look up when a certain dinosaur lived, right, and it gives you an exact like date, and it says like 77.3 million years ago, right? That means there's not a lot of specimens of it typically, because if it has a range, like if you go look up when T-Rex existed, it existed for 68 to 66 million years ago, so that's 2 million years. That's because we have a lot of specimens of T-Rex, and we can give that range of like time frame very confidently. But if we only have one specimen, it's only going to be dated to one time. But yeah, Nanooksaurus was a little smaller, ranging anywhere between 20 to 30 feet, probably just over a ton or two. Lived alongside animals like Pachyrhinosaurus, Edmontosaurus, and stuff like that. Eutyrannus, on the other hand, was early Cretaceous. It's also an early relative of T-Rex, Proceratosauridae, but a part of the Tyrannosauroididae superfamily. Those guys would have been hunting things like smaller sauropods, Hadrosaurs, and Psittacosaurus in early Cretaceous China. They also have an additional third finger, funnily enough. But yeah, Cosmoceratops is awesome. It is awesome. It's got that big frill, and I think that's awesome. Yeah. We can, cool facts about Leviathan or the whale. Leviathan, yes, or Leviathan, however you want to pronounce it. Very interesting animal. It's possible that it kind of had this cosmopolitan distribution, which basically means it was everywhere. Same as Megalodon. So Leviathan and Megalodon probably came in contact with each other several times during their reign of the oceans. Now, much like other like relatives of Leviathan today, those being things like sperm whales, their diet probably consisted of squids. However, there is a good chance it did hunt other whales. Now, fun fact, Leviathan, I want to say, excluding tusks, has the largest teeth of any animal. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty, because again, not a mammal guy, but I want to say that, like, if you're excluding tusks, I want to say it has the biggest teeth. But yeah, would a Spino or a T-Rex win in a water fight? No way to tell, honestly. They wouldn't have come in contact with each other IRL. T-Rex was surprisingly buoyant. Spinosaurus was surprisingly dense. Spinosaurus would probably sink in the water. T-Rex would probably float atop it. I guess a Spinosaurus could, like, nip at the feet of a T-Rex, but at that point, I don't know why the T-Rex wouldn't just try swimming back to land. So, yeah. How do dinosaurs communicate, or do they, or will there be proof of it? You hear proof of it every day, I reckon. Every day. When the sun comes up and you hear the birds, that's them communicating. Those are dinosaurs out there, right there. The songbirds, all of them are dinosaurs. So you hear them communicating every day. As for like larger non-avian dinosaurs, it would probably be kind of a mixture of what we hear from modern dinosaurs. With the things like the dromaeosaurids, the troodontids, and stuff like that, they probably would be very similar sounding to modern birds, especially like birds that are around their size. Like, go listen to a cassowary or an ostrich, or a shoebill for that matter. Shoebills are just insane. Whereas with like bigger ones, you know, typically the bigger an animal is, the lower the sound it's going to be making. Of course, there are always exceptions. So tyrannosaurs or any large theropod really could probably like stick its like head towards the ground, like point its nose towards the ground, let out this deep bellow, and it could travel for miles. So yeah, a Bertosaurus versus Gorgosaurus, who would win? Whichever one's heavier. That's my guide. But yeah, have you got any cool Sinosauropteryx facts? Yeah, so Sinosauropteryx obviously had with the Nanotyrannus stuff happening, I'm very hesitant to start talking about the claim that it is a juvenile Eutyrannus. That was an opinion piece put out by Mark Whitten not too long ago. Still, even so, Sinosauropteryx is a really cool little compsognathid. Now, there is supposedly a adult specimen of Sinosauropteryx. I think that's still being talked about in some spheres. I looked into that a bit more, and I kind of walked away with the idea of it kind of being a little bit disputed. If it is like an adult specimen, then hey, yeah, that completely erases the contention of it being a juvenile or hatchling Eutyrannus. But if it's not, then, you know, we still only have juvenile specimens of compsognathids. But this guy's really cool. It lived around the time of Eutyrannus in China, around the early Cretaceous. These guys have one particularly well-preserved, fossil, and it is so well-preserved, or one of their specimens is so well-preserved that you can actually, like, visibly see the color of the animal in the rock. We also know that they had this really big bushy tail, like a raccoon. It's really cool. I like the big bushy tail. It's awesome. So yeah. Who would win, Eutyrannus or Megalosaurus? Whichever one's heavier. Have you seen the Spinosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus fossil? Yes! I saw someone talking about it here on TikTok not too long ago. They were claiming that there was fossil evidence of a Spinosaurus bringing down a Carcharodontosaurus. I'm here to tell you that that's not what that fossil means. We just know that there was bite marks and a Spinosaur tooth lodged inside of the vertebrae of a Carcharodontosaurus. There is nothing on those fossils that can 100% determine that that Spinosaur brought down that Carcharodontosaurus, because that could very well be scavenging. We have evidence of some Spinosaurids being opportunistic on land and like taking terrestrial prey. Especially now, there was a pterosaur that was described a few weeks ago now from Spinosaur vomit. So yeah, or supposedly Spinosaur vomit. But yeah. Can I talk about Miragaia? Miragaia is, honestly, I feel really bad for Miragaia. Simply because I remember when they added it to Path of Titans and everyone like was looking at the Miragaia model and they were like, why does it look so bad? It looks so bad. Why does it look like that? And then I look it up. I look up Miragaia's skeletal reconstructions and I compare it to the Path of Titans model. And I'm like, this model is 100% paleo accurate. It just looks weird, guys. It just looks a little strange. There is obviously some contention on whether Miragaia is a juvenile of Dacenturus. Dacenturus is my personal favorite Stegosaurid. But I'm hesitant to call anything a juvenile of anything at this point because of the Nanotyrannus stuff. People are going to be reanalyzing a bunch of different fossils of a bunch of different animals now, trying to figure out what's what. But anyway, yeah, so Miragaia was around mid to late Jurassic, I want to say, somewhere around there, of what is now Europe. I believe it's known from a handful of specimens. One of them was particularly well preserved, and it came from Portugal, I want to say. I think they actually found that specimen while they were building a highway. It was like a highway or a tunnel or something. So, yeah, very cool. You watched the Camp Cretaceous season? I haven't finished Chaos Theory. I've watched all of Camp Cretaceous, and I'm halfway through season 4 of Chaos Theory at the moment. So, no spoilers! No spoilers! But yeah. Who would win a fight? Carnotaurus or T-Rex? Whoever is heavier. In that case, it is T-Rex. And I'm gonna be honest. That one is just not even close. That Carno is getting flung into the upper atmosphere. Not literally, I'm being hyperbolic, but there's a very big weight discrepancy there. But yeah. Do you think the Siberian tiger could take down a Spinosaurus? I've heard. No. There's probably a very big difference in hunting an elephant and in hunting a Spinosaur. Because, yeah, elephants are intimidating, but they don't have arms that are the size of people that are tipped with 3 giant claws. That one I'm just going to outright say no on. Was Therizinosaurus weak? Therizinosaurus, and this goes honestly for all dinosaurs, Therizinosaurus was as weak or as strong as it needed to be to thrive in its ecosystem. Which is essentially me saying that it fit its niche, it fit its role in its ecosystem, and that was good enough for the animal. Now, whether or not the claws were weak or strong, there's some debate on. The claws could have been reinforced with keratin. The inside of the claw was not particularly strong. And I can tell you, as the owner of a Therizinosaurus claw, if you use that as a weapon, it is going to snap. Now, of course, again, it could be reinforced by keratin, but at the end of the day, I don't think that'll make too much of a difference. So, yeah. Is this a tiny classroom or a huge Sinosauropteryx? I'll let you decide that. What dinosaur turned into chickens? The dinosaur that turned into the chicken was the lineage that gave us and I'm gonna switch avatars real quick. The lineage that gave us modern birds. Now, I don't think there is any particular animal that I could point to. Of course, you can point to like things like Sinosauropteryx. Archaeopteryx, that's the word I was looking for. You could point to animals like Archaeopteryx, which its name literally means first bird, but you're going to be looking at that particular lineage that branches off in the middle Jurassic. So there is no like T-Rex doesn't become a chicken. That's not how that works, right? And dinosaurs don't magically become birds after the KT impact. What essentially happens is that birds were already here. In fact, there were so many different types of birds in the Mesozoic. You had toothless birds, you had opposite birds, you had toothed birds. You had a whole opposite birds, by the way. That's a huge rabbit hole. I don't think I can confidently talk on that simply because I don't know too much about them. But that is a crazy rabbit hole to go down. Look it up if you want to hear more about those. But the one lineage of birds that survived the KT impact that were already here were the toothless birds, which is why no modern bird have true dental structures. They have no true dental structures. Of course, things like ducks, geese, and swans and stuff like that, they've got like the keratinous spikes on their tongue and on the sides of their mouth. They have those. Those are not dental structures. Those are something completely different. But yeah. Talk about any ankylosaur. Dude, ankylosaurs in general are really cool. They used to be really easy to understand. I'm going to be honest with you. Because you have the big family of ankylosauria. But then you have a bunch of other small groups. And used to, you would have the ankylosaurs were the ones with the club tails, and the nodosaurs were the ones that don't have club tails. That has recently gotten a bit more complicated. I say recently, but it was like 2 years ago at this point. So there's like 4 groups of them, and again, I can't speak too confidently on that either because I'm not well versed in how that was shaping up. I just know that they got broken up into like 4 groups, and I haven't really gone back because like when this was happening, people were still like reorganizing where certain animals go where. But ankylosaurs in general are very cool. A misconception about ankylosaurs is that their armor and club tails were exclusively to deal with predators. That is not the case. We see that in nature, a lot of animals that develop things like antlers, horns, tusks, these like weapons that you can use against predators, while they are effective against predators, are typically not used in that way most often. Most often they're used to fight other members of their species. And we have evidence from a ankylosaur named Zool that they were fighting each other because there's an ankylosaur specimen that has like cracked osteoderms, which is what the bony plates are on their backs. Excuse me. The cracked one was made by a blunt impact, and we think that it was done by another ankylosaur. So yeah, very fascinating animals. You talk about Fukui raptor. Fukui raptor, I honestly, unless there has been a change, I don't think there's anything to talk about. Fukui, because let me double check this. The Megaraptoran name, classification. It's classified as a Megaraptor at the moment. And I want to say, wasn't this one was this the one that had just the teeth? Do they have it? I don't remember if they have anyone. Okay. Well, interestingly, it is a Megaraptor, which is pretty fascinating. And what is now Japan, yeah, which is also additionally very surprising because Japan doesn't have a record of very well-preserved fossils. A lot of the fossils that end up coming out of Japan are things like teeth and stuff like that. No, don't get me wrong, Japan had like probably a ton of biodiversity in the Mesozoic, but just not a lot of it ended up preserving because, well, it's an island and, well, typically that doesn't bode well. However, it does have very good things like mosasaur specimens and other like marine reptiles. And I want to say, yeah, this guy lived in the early Cretaceous. Very interesting Megaraptor. Yeah. Have there ever been venomous dinosaurs? Nope. We have no evidence of any venomous dinosaurs that we know of. There are, I think there's poisonous birds, but I don't think we have venomous dinosaurs. And just for clarification, there is a difference. If you don't know the difference, venomous is when it bites you and you keel over. Poisonous is when you bite it and you keel over. So that's the difference. But yeah, talk about Mipe. Mipe is really interesting. Mipe is known from several fragmentary fossils of like one individual. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of fossil material of it, but that may change in the future as we're getting a lot of papers coming out of South America recently, which I'm really happy to see. But Mipe was huge. It was the largest of the megaraptors, and of course, it lives on in infamy because of the primordial tyrants Mipe mod over on Path of Titans. It's got that excellent sound design from Mordekaiser, and I do believe they are updating the sound soon to go with the long distance calls. So that's really fascinating. But yeah, it lived in and around the late Cretaceous of South America. South America at the time was more dominated by things like megaraptors, abelisaurs, and stuff like that. So there's a good chance it had competition with abelisaurs and possibly other members of the megaraptor family or other members of its own species. Also, I'm just going to say this now. That animal does not weigh as much as it should. Mipe, as well as all other megaraptors, are incredibly lightweight. A good majority of their skeleton was hollow. I know we talk about how dinosaurs had hollow bones and that dinosaurs don't weigh as much as they realistically should if they had mammal anatomy and mammal bones because of those hollow bones. Megaraptors took that to a whole new level. Mipe was like 33 feet long and weighed like about 1.5 to 3 tons. Insane. Absolutely insane. Outrageous, even. But yeah. Which dinosaur had the best or worst night vision if they did? Well, a lot of birds today do have night vision, or have vision capable of seeing very well at night. Your best guesses for those, because like obviously in order to tell what kind of vision an animal has, you need to know several things. You need to know how big the eyeball is. You need to know how, like, what ways the eyeballs are facing, and you also need to actually see the eyeball. Unfortunately, we can't see the eyeball. We can figure out the positioning of the eye, and we can calculate the size of the eye. So your best guess for a night vision having dinosaur would be something like a T-Rex. Their eyes were huge. Their eyes face forward, just like ours do. By the way, if you've heard that audio before, hi, that was my voice. That edit like blew up, and I like seriously, I hear my voice on like every single platform on the internet at this point. But yeah, so your best guess would probably be something like T-Rex. Yeah. What is the oldest dinosaur? That's going to go back to the Nyatosaurus. Nyatosaurus was like one of the earliest dinosaur fossils that we have. There's speculation that it's the last common ancestor of all dinosaurs. It does seem to have those features. Unfortunately, I don't think it is the last common ancestor of all dinosaurs because, you know, then you get back into that conversation about how rare dinosaurs were when they first appeared and like they later became abundant. So, yeah. Mosasaurs are cool. We were talking about mosasaurs earlier, how they're not dinosaurs, they're squamites. Something I didn't mention while I was talking about that is that mosasaurs have living relatives. Much like dinosaurs, mosasaurs have living relatives. Does anyone know what the living relatives of mosasaurs are? Would chat like to guess? Most overpowered dinosaur? I'm gonna hold on to that comment. I'll answer that after this. Someone said lizards, dodo, bear. It is Komodo dragons. It is Komodo dragons. It is specifically monitor lizards as a whole. They were kind of in that group of the Vernidae lizards and stuff like that. So yeah, and interestingly enough, mosasaurs have 4 sets of teeth. In fact, I can show you that. I'm gonna answer the overpowered one too because I do have something to say for that. Here he is. So if I come up to you guys over here and I show you, you will notice that it has teeth on the bottom, teeth on the top, and if you look right there, there are 2 extra sets of teeth at the back of its mouth. Isn't that fascinating? I think that's so cool. Also, this is a hand puppet, so I'm just kind of. Uh, but yeah, okay. So the question of most overpowered dinosaur, that's one that I've been waiting for someone to ask recently because I have something to say on that. When you look at certain dinosaurs, we'll say T-Rex because that's the obvious one that a lot of people think of when they think of overpowered dinosaurs. You look at its like, okay, that's weird. You look at its adaptations and it's like super strong bite and stuff like that. And you're like, wow, that is insane. That animal was just uncontested apex predator of its ecosystem. And while that might be true, T-Rex was not overpowered at all. Because T-Rex was built the way it was for a reason. Because it is fighting hadrosaurs that weigh twice as much as elephants. They're fighting ceratopsians that have horns on their face that are longer than some people are tall. They are fighting like low to the ground, armored tanks with a giant hammer on its tail, as well as possibly several other species, like you have Denversaurus and stuff like that. T-Rex wasn't overpowered. No dinosaur was overpowered because they are built the way they are for a reason. Whoops, I dropped my controller. Let me grab that real quick. Yeah, so it's all just cause and effect. That's what evolution is, and that's how you discern that. Because again, it's not overpowered just to be overpowered. Evolution is a cause effect. Evolution runs on cause, effect, and opportunity. And I'm not gonna reset that. I need to get a good height. I don't know what's going on with my model. It's so weird. Anyway, but yeah. Saying about Nerf T-Rex? No. Is Saurophagonax actually invalid? The info online about it about that is really inconsistent. You gotta check your dates. Check your dates on stuff online. Because like the Saurophagonax stuff happened like early 2025, late or no, it happened 2024. I remember that because I posted a video last December or January talking about dinosaurs that got invalidated that year. Saurophagonax is not technically invalid, it is chimeric. So the issue with it is that Saurophagonax as a name is sticking around. However, Saurophagonax as a name is no longer describing the type of animal you think it is. The Allosauroid Saurophagonax is gone. It is invalid. It is currently seen as a chimera. However, the Allosaurid material from that chimeric specimen has been redescribed as Allosaurus anax, and it is still a massive Allosaurus. The other material, which is thought to belong to a sauropod, based on the conventions of taxonomy, that material, the sauropod material, if it is described as a new genus, would keep the name Saurophagonax. So Saurophagonax, potentially, as a name, is sticking around. However, it is no longer describing an animal that you think it is. So, yeah. Also, thank you everyone for the gifts. I really appreciate that. Catching up with chat. How long did Spino live for? Spino lived around the Campanian, I want to say. No, not Campanian. Cinnamanian. It's the Cinnamanian. So you had, that's like roughly 93, 94 million years ago. Again, unfortunately, with Spinosaurus, we don't have a lot of great material for it, so getting precise dates on when they first appear and when they disappear is hard to say, but we do know when they disappear because there is the climate in the Cinnamanian begins to shift. The Earth begins to warm up and ocean levels begin to rise, and unfortunately this devastates the natural ecosystem of Spinosaurus, and it also devastates the population of the Carcharodontosaurids. So most Spinosaurids and Carcharodontosaurids go completely extinct during this shift in climate. But as for like when it first appeared, little shaky, not much is known. Again, very fragmentary specimens, all that jazz, but we do know it was around there. As for on an individual basis, Spinosaurs are a part of a group called the Carnosaurs, and Carnosaurs statistically live longer than things like Cerulosaurs. I can never say that right. The group that the Tyrannosaurs belong to, they live longer. I believe there is a specimen of Meraxes, which is a Carcharodontosaurid that is supposedly around 50 years old when it passed. So that opens the door to a very long lifespan for some of these animals. Yeah. Oh, talk about Concavinator. Concavinator is fascinating. It is also a Carcharodontosaurid. And I will actually show this guy to you, and I'm also going to ask you a question about it, so be ready. Be ready to answer a question. Changing into Concavinator. All right. Are we ready? Here's the question. This is Concavinator. Lived in the early Cretaceous of what is now Spain and Portugal and the Iberian Peninsula. Here's the question. Why does it have this hump? Why is this sail here? Why do you think it's here? Because it's I want to see what you guys come up with. Okay, we have an answer of display, swimming, display again, because it was born with it. That's fair. Swimming. Some are saying swimming. Some to pick it up as better as a toy. Movement. Okay. The answer? We have no idea. There is no correct answer, but there's also technically no incorrect answer. There's a lot of very interesting interpretations of Concavinator. Some of it, like in Path of Titans, are displayed as being aquatic. There is nothing about this animal that remotely suggests that it was aquatic, other than the fact that that resembles a dorsal fin. As for display, yeah, maybe, could be. As for, I heard someone said, like, why, no one in chat said this, at least based on what I saw. Someone suggested it was like a camel's hump. I highly doubt that. But yeah. Yeah. Teacher. Hey, good luck with that. Talk about Therizinosaurus. We talked about it very briefly, talking about its like claws and stuff like that. It potentially being like somewhat weak. Again, I mentioned it a handful of times. There was like a debate like a while ago that never really got like a clear answer on like whether or not Therizinosaurus could have potentially been plantigrade. Oh, by the way, there's a YouTube channel called Factor Trace. I think Fact Trace. Am I remembering that correct? I don't know. They do a lot of really cool videos on dinosaurs. They did like every Tyrannosaur ever described, every Stegosaur ever described, every Spinosaur ever described, every Carcharodontosaur described. And recently they put out a new video just the other day called Every Therizinosaurus Ever Described. So give that a watch. It's really well made. They make a lot of cool stuff. Talking about baryonyx. Yeah. Oh, hold on. I can answer this one real quick. Are there aquatic dinosaurs? No. Not really. I mean, if you want to count penguins or ducks or maybe the Spinosaurs, but that's about it. I mean, there's also seagulls and other like water birds and stuff like that. But, you know, baryonyx. Baryonyx is a really cool baryonychine Spinosaurid. It was the first dinosaur ever described as a pescivore, meaning it mostly eats fish. Baryonychine Spinosaurids and Spinosaurine Spinosaurids are characteristically different in how their skulls are shaped and how their teeth are shaped. Baryonychine Spinosaurs have recurved teeth, which basically means their teeth slightly curve towards the back of their mouth, whereas Spinosaurine Spinosaurids all have very straight conical teeth. But baryonyx, I believe, also has been found with terrestrial organisms in its stomach contents. So we know that the baryonychine Spinosaurs did prey on terrestrial animals as well. And obviously, like I mentioned before, we have that new that new pterosaur that's very much similar to Pterodastro. It has like the weird baleen stuff in its jaws. That was found in like Spinosaur vomit, more than likely. So yeah, they would occasionally eat stuff like that, and they weren't just limited to fish, though a good chunk of their diet was probably still made up of fish. So yeah. Talk about Deinosuchus. I know it's not a dinosaur, but still, Deinosuchus is really interesting. Unfortunately, I think Deinosuchus actually dies out before Tyrannosaurus shows up in North America. But as far as I know, I think there's like 4 or 5 species of it. It is one of the largest genera of crocodiliforms to ever live. Now, Deinosuchus is not a true crocodilian like we suspected it was a few years ago. A paper came out not too long ago suggesting that it is not a true crocodilian because it was previously labeled a alligatoroid. Functionally, we thought it was a giant alligator. It probably isn't. Now, there's a lot of confusion on what constitutes as a crocodilian, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a lesson on that. True crocodilians are things like the ones we have today. Gharials, caimans, crocodiles, alligators, stuff like those guys. Those guys first appear in the late Cretaceous. True crocodilians appear in the late Cretaceous. Anything before that is typically referred to as a crocodiliform. Now, with how phylogenetics works, modern crocodiles and crocodilians are also labeled crocodiliforms, but that is like they have a further like denomination of themselves. So yeah, very interesting. I think I want to say Deinosuchus died out around like 70-ish million years ago. But yeah. There is Spinosaurus will, or how many Spinosaurus will it take to take down a Triceratops? At least 3, I would say. What do you mean by there are no aquatic dinosaurs? There are no aquatic dinosaurs. You've got penguins, waterfowl, stuff like puffins, seagulls. I mean, you've got those guys. And yeah, you can probably count the Spinosaurids, but like most of the ones that I've just said are semi-aquatic because they still come onto land, right? Other than that, there's nothing. No aquatic dinosaurs exist. There are no fully aquatic dinosaurs to my knowledge. Mosasaurs are lizards. Plesiosaurs, by extension, pliosaurs are closer related to turtles. Ichthyosaurs are just weird, also probably closely related to turtles. Those guys aren't even archosaurs, let alone dinosaurs. So yeah. Utah raptor or grizzly, who comes out on top? Probably a grizzly. What about Utah? Utah's really cool. Utah's one of my personal favorite dinosaurs of all time. Before I had the logo that I have today, I actually had a logo with a Utah raptor instead of a Nanooksaurus. My logo, funnily enough, is not a Tyrannosaurus. It is not a Tarbosaurus, but it is a Nanooksaurus. It is I had one of my artist friends. I commissioned her to do it for me and gave her a whole bunch of different references, and we reconstructed Nanooksaurus, or she reconstructed, I should say, Nanooksaurus' skull from that because we don't have a lot from it. But Utah raptor itself is awesome. It is this early Cretaceous dromaeosaur that lives in what is now, surprisingly, shockingly, I know it's going to absolutely blow your mind. It's from Utah. It was possibly an apex predator of its ecosystem. It does share the Cedar Mountain Formation with Acrocanthosaurus, though it is thought that Utahraptor and Acrocanthosaurus did not coexist at the same time. And it was hunting things like iguanodontids and stuff like that, and it was possibly fully feathered, much like other dromaeosaurids. So yeah. But yeah. Talk about the Dinosaurus, this most unknown dinosaur because they only found a few bones. We were talking about it earlier, that it's like one of the earliest known dinosaurs, and like its relation to it being possibly one of the first dinosaurs ever. I doubt it's the first dinosaur because, again, saying all of that. But unfortunately, other than that, I don't know too much else about it. I just know that it is a very, very early dinosaur. So, yeah. Dinosaurs, lizards? Nope, not at all. Dinosaurs are archosaurs. Lizards belong to the group of Squamata. So no, dinosaurs are not lizards. In fact, they're not even closely related to lizards. Fun fact, because birds, being dinosaurs, and crocodilians are in the group of Archosauria, separate from the squamites, that does mean that birds and crocodiles are more closely related than lizards and crocodiles. Take that as you will. But yeah. Do Nanooksaurus or Eutyrannus? We talked about Nanooksaurus on length earlier, so I will talk about Eutyrannus. Eutyrannus, I believe, is known from at least 3 specimens. There is a younger individual, a slightly larger individual, and then an adult individual, or presumably adult individual. It is the largest known dinosaur with confirmed feathering. Of course, feathers are speculated on other larger dinosaurs like Dinochirus, but as of now, the only thing going for Dinochirus's debate on plumage is certain fused tail vertebrae for, fan feathers. Unfortunately, that doesn't really tell us too much. We don't know the type of plumage, but with Eutyrannus, we do know the type of plumage. They have very hair-like feathers, so to speak, something like proto feathers. And we do see this in its fossilized material, as the type of rock that Eutyrannus or these individuals were fossilized in preserved a lot of good detail. And that's actually the same. And again, that's also why the material for Sinosauropteryx is also really good, because they come from the same formation. With Eutyrannus itself, there's a lot of debate on whether or not it was a pack hunter because of the 3 individuals being found together. As of now, that has no concrete answer. But it might be likely, or maybe they just lived in familial groups. Obviously, the old statement of wolf pack structures is incorrect. There's no alpha, there's no omega or beta. All of that stuff is just wrong. And the guy who came up with all of that stuff even discredits that paper now because he realized, oh, wait a minute, these guys don't function like that. It's just a whole bunch of family units. But yeah. Opinions on Game of Thrones? Never watched it, I'm gonna be honest. House of the Dragons is good, though. I watched that because there was a lot more dragons in it. What's the difference between lizards and reptiles? The lizards are a specific type of reptiles. Reptile pertains to a lot of other types of animals. Reptile can mean crocodile. It can mean lizard. It can mean turtle. It can mean bird. It can mean any of those. Lizard is just one type of reptile. Also, yes, birds are reptiles. Anyway, if dinosaurs never went extinct, how well do you think they could have handled the Ice Age? Probably very well, actually. We have evidence of dinosaurs in frigid conditions. There's evidence of large theropods in Antarctica. There's evidence of large of dinosaurs in the Arctic and Alaska and stuff like that. I think they could have handled the Ice Age very well, because later large-bodied dinosaurs I would say that any dinosaur past the early Jurassic was probably not cold-blooded. They were probably warm-blooded to an extent. What extent that is and how it compares to mammals being warm-blooded can be debated all day, but there is a good chance that they produce their own body heat, especially if they are living in those kinds of frigid conditions. And we have a lot of evidence of different lineages of dinosaurs in these frigid conditions. We have theropods, ceratopsids, hadrosaurs, stuff like that, dromaeosaurids, troodontids. It's crazy. Okay, talk about the heterodontosaurids. It's my favorite one. Heterodontosaurids are very interesting. There's one specific type of heterodontosaurid that I will always hold contempt for, and that is Pegomastax. That dude is so annoying in Ark, but because they just come up to you and they steal your stuff and they run away. But they're really cool. Heterodontosaurids in general, though, or Heterodontosaurus, I should say, is from the early Jurassic, around 190 million years ago. And I want to say they're ornithischians. I'm not incredibly confident on that, but I want to say that. But yeah, very interesting. Very strange teeth. Let me add that. Weird teeth. Super weird teeth. Very strange. And TikTok thinks I'm AFK. Don't we just love it? Sauropod death pits. Oh boy. Okay, so I haven't actually gotten to talk about this on stream, but I have made a video on it. So if you don't know what the sauropod death pits are, oh, it is so fascinating. The immediate image that probably comes to mind is something similar to the La Brea tar pits, right? You're picturing a whole bunch of sauropods that got stuck and trapped in like some substance like tar. That is not the case. The sauropod death pits have no bones relating to sauropods. Instead, they are a series of footprints produced by sauropods. What happened here was essentially a bunch of sauropods walked over some wet, marshy terrain like mud, quicksand, stuff like that, and as they like stepped into that, it creates this divot, this dent in the ground, and then they lift their foot up, and then immediately as they lift their foot up, the water in the ground rushes to fill in the footprint once again. Now, here's the thing with sauropods. A lot of animals, because of how big they are going to follow them. Because typically, sauropods are going to be like migrating to like lusher areas. So it's a smart idea for other animals to follow them. And what ended up happening was that some of these smaller animals that were so small, they fell into the footprints produced by the sauropods and drowned. And they were preserved. We have the fossils. Go look it up. It's so fascinating. It's so cool. But yeah. Talk about Dinocurus. Dinocurus is really fascinating. It is what I like to call the gigaduck. It is this giant ornithomimosaur. It is an ornithomimosaur, not a ornithomimid. A lot of people get that confused. Ornithomimosauria is the superfamily. Ornithomimids are the family. Ornithomimids are things like Gallimimus, Struthiomimus, and stuff like that. Ornithomimosauria is much bigger. So yeah, they're really fascinating, probably somewhat pestivorous. They probably ate things like seagrass, fish, combination of that stuff. They are from the Namek Formation, so its natural predator would have been something along the lines of Tarbosaurus. How a Tarbosaurus would hunt a Dinocurus exactly? Very carefully, because it is not called Gigaduck for no reason. It is an elephant-sized duck, essentially. It also is named Terrible Hand, I believe, because it has these massive claws. And for a time, that was the only material we had of Dinocurus, so we thought it was like some massive apex predator. And then we found its skull, and we're like, oh, it's a duck. So did Utah Raptor hunt in packs like shown in Dinosaur Revolution? Probably not. There is not a lot of fossil evidence for pack behavior in any dinosaur, to be fair, as that kind of behavior would require a lot of evidence, such as certain dinosaurs found like together when fossilized, but even then that's shaky. The real evidence you would need, and I forget who said this, but I 100% agree with them. It might have been David Hone. The most compelling evidence you could ever have for pack hunting behavior in any dinosaur is if you found footprints from a dinosaur, from a hunt specifically, and you had two theropods that were running, and one like runs off to the side and leaves its footprints behind, and then the other one steps into the footprint of the previous one. That would 100% confirm that those two animals were there hunting that animal at the same time. Now, would that be compelling evidence for, like, complicated pack hunting behavior? Maybe not entirely, because that still just shows that those animals were there at the same time, and a lot of animals are opportunistic, right? So, not a lot of evidence one way or the other, to be fair. So, yeah. Talk about Nothosaurus. Nothosaurus is really fascinating because it's kind of like, I want to say it's a plesiosaur. That is what always comes to mind when I look at it. And of course, I'm not great with marine reptiles, unfortunately, so I am going to double check myself on something. Okay, so it's not technically in direct relation to... Interesting. Okay, so no, I take that back. It is related to plesiosaurs and stuff like that. Did it evolve into plesiosaurs later? Probably not directly, but what eventually would give us the fully aquatic plesiosaurs probably looked something like Nothosaurus. Now, Nothosaurus itself, I want to say, I'm going to double check myself real quick. It is about mid to late Triassic, about 240 to 210 million years ago. So these guys were around for about 30 million years. They're kind of like, what's the best way to put it? They're kind of like reptilian seals with really big teeth. I would not want to come across them. But yeah, very fascinating animals because they're basically plesiosaurs that can come onto land. Very interesting, very fascinating. But yeah. Is this a class for dinosaurs or about dinosaurs? A bit of both. If you are a dinosaur like myself, then you can come and join as well. But we're mostly teaching about... That was weird. About dinosaurs. But yeah. Footolonchosaurus. Okay, I actually have some history with this animal. So Footolonchosaurus is this massive titanosaur from, I want to say, South America. And I'm gonna double check myself on this. Footolonchosaurus. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, okay. Late Cretaceous titanosaur from, Titanosauria is from Argentina. Okay, so I have history with this animal because back in like middle school, I did like this raffle thing where I put like an image of Footolonchosaurus on a piece of paper, and I was like I actually printed it out, and I was like, if you can guess the name of this animal, I'll buy you something from the vending machine. No one got it. No one ever did. But yeah, it is this massive titanosaur from what is now modern day Argentina, late Cretaceous. But yeah, it is around, what does it say? 93 to 85 million years ago. Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, hey, so here's something. There is a mounted skeleton of this animal in the Royal Ontario Museum. Go check that out if you're in the area, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. Are you a concha? I am a concha. Talk about Majungasaurus. Majungasaurus is really cool. Because it is an abelisaur from what is now Madagascar. Now, previously it held the name of Majungatholus. And Majungatholus, is currently, as of what I understand, is a retired name. I don't remember why the name got changed exactly, so that's some homework for you guys to go and look up. But these guys were abelisaurs from the late Cretaceous, what is now modern-day Madagascar, and in the late Cretaceous, Madagascar was already split off from what is now, like, the eastern half of Africa. So these guys would have existed alongside animals such as Mashikasaurus, Beelzebufo, Isosaurus. Was it Isosaurus? I want to say it's Isosaurus. Or no, it's Rapetosaurus, I think, in Madagascar. Interestingly, much like Hatseg Island, Madagascar, because it was isolated to an island, the animals there suffer, or I say suffer, but from insular dwarfism, or island dwarfism, which basically is when an animal gets smaller because there are less resources for them to have on that island, so they adapt, they get a little smaller over the course of a few generations, and then they kind of stagnate into this smaller size. So yeah, I'm not expecting to pop up on my feed. No one ever is. Can I join you, sir? We have a Discord in my bio if you want to go check that out. We have a Discord server if you want to go check that out. Oh yeah, I probably should talk about this. So we recently hit 100,000 followers, and I'd like to thank you guys so very much for that. That is just absolutely mind-blowing, insane to me. And part of my promise once hitting 100,000 followers was that I would host a Dino class here in VR for you guys to join. And we are working on that right now. Later today, after stream, I'll be meeting up with a few of the people that are going to help me run that. and we're gonna work out how that's gonna go. I have some ideas. We're gonna work that out with them. And currently, I can say this now. Currently, the idea for when that is going to happen is next week. Next Saturday around 2 p.m. Central Time is when that dinosaur class will happen. So be on the lookout for further announcements. Obviously, time, date may change. But yeah. You talk about Iguanodon. Iguanodon is super interesting. So it is one of the first dinosaurs ever described. It's just it's the second, I want to say. Interestingly enough, the material used to originally describe Iguanodon got reassigned to something else. But I think by the time that happened, there was further fossil material for Iguanodon, so it got to keep its validity and name. So they just identified a neotype and went with that. Iguanodon originally was thought to have like a nose spike, but we later found out that that spike was actually its thumb. Now, was it using its thumb to fight off predators? Could have. Would it use it that way often? Probably not, because as I mentioned before on stream, a lot of the times when an animal, especially a herbivore, develops weaponry, it is not actually trying to, like, it is not actually evolving that to fend off predators. Most of the time, they develop those to fight each other. So there's a good chance that instead of boxing large theropods, iguanodons just had, like, they were just fist fighting each other. So yeah. But yeah. Nanotyrannus confirmed? Yes, I saw that. Very, very cool stuff. We talked a little bit about that earlier on stream. I'll talk a little bit more about it now. It has been identified to be a Eutyrannosaurid of some kind. Now, the actual, like, layout of what that looks like, of what this new proposed family of the Nanotyrannosauridae, what that actually looks like is up for debate. I've seen many different interpretations of it, but we do know that it does not belong to the Tyrannosauridae, which is what some refer to as the true Tyrannosaurs. It is possibly a sister lineage to that. So yeah, very, very fascinating. Where it comes about, I'm personally on the side of it being a Appalachian migrant into Laramidia. However, there are plenty of other theories as well. There's the possibility of a ghost lineage, which basically means that all of the things that preceded Nanotyrannus just didn't fossilize, and Nanotyrannus was the only one that did. So it could possibly be a ghost lineage. So yeah. Very interesting, though. Very, very interesting. How do you feel in the Jurassic Park world / movies, or even accurate? Do you guys know why the Jurassic franchise doesn't make accurate dinosaurs? Like, because, like, obviously everyone looks at these dinosaurs and they're like, this isn't accurate at all. You know why, don't you? Like, you know why? It's because you can't copyright an animal. You can't put a trademark on an animal. That's why the designs of these, like, recent Jurassic franchise movies have been so, like, out of left field. It's because you can't trademark something like that. That's why certain, like, companies that make dinosaur figures are able to sell things like Jurassic Park animals, as long as they don't say that they're from Jurassic Park, because they're animals and you can't trademark an animal. So yeah. Is this VR chat? Yes. Oh yeah. Hello, Lakota. Hello, welcome in. The congregated teaching class. Because I can. If you would like me to be another dinosaur, I can. We can do. How about we do Changosaurus? It's basically my stand-in for Nanotyrannus at the moment, so we'll do Chanjo. Hello. But yeah. How did the types of dinosaurs change throughout the different periods? You have a lot of, like, honestly, if we went over all of the different changes of all the different groups and families that happened, it would take forever. Theropods as a lineage changed quite a lot. You have your early starts like Coelophysis, and then you got the neotheropods like Dilophosaurus and stuff like that in the early Jurassic, and then you have the later carnosaurs, things like the allosaurs and the megalosaurs, and then with those guys, the allosauroids continue into the early Cretaceous. The megalosaurids end up really going out, but they're succeeded by the spinosaurs, which are like an offshoot of the megalosaurs. The allosauroids or the allosaurids go extinct, but they're succeeded by the carcharodontosaurids. Those two lineages basically just vanish after the Cenomanian. And then the next big lineage of theropods are things like the tyrannosaurs. Obviously, like just saying that, we missed the divergence of birds. We missed the divergence of the troodontids, the dromaeosaurids, and all of the different weird families that precede the tyrannosaurs. And like you get into like the thyreophorans, the ceratopsids, and like how the hadrosaurs popped up. It gets really complicated, really convoluted. All of those ecosystems are really vast and stuff like that. So it gets really, really complicated. Essentially, you just have this drastically different kind of ecosystem depending on like what time period you're looking at. So yeah. We're in Jurassic World Evolution models. Yes, I have. This one is Jurassic World Evolution. Some of my models come from very different games. We have Jurassic World Evolution. You have Beast of Bermuda, Prehistoric Kingdom. And I think there's a handful that are like custom models that are like sold as 3D assets online that someone has like put into VR chat, which is what I'm using to do all of this. So yeah. Talk about Incisivsaurus. Incisivsaurus is very fascinating because it's got like buck teeth like a beaver does, but it also seems to have a beak. But and give me 1 second. Forgive me for not knowing about this animal. Incisivsaurus. Yeah. This guy, this weird theropod. So this guy was living around 126 or 124 million years ago. Right around the early Cretaceous. These guys are Oviraptorosaurs. That's fascinating. I didn't know that. That is super cool. They were described in 2002. I had no idea this dude was an Oviraptorosaur. That's really fascinating. So yeah, they have these like really big buck teeth right in the front of their mouth, which is what they're named after. They are incisor teeth, so they're Incisivsaurus. Very fascinating animal. If a lizard is a type of reptile, doesn't that mean Mosasaurus is an aquatic dinosaur? No. Dinosaurs are not lizards. Mosasaurs are lizards. Dinosaurs are their own thing. Mosasaurs are not dinosaurs. Here, hold on. I think I can use the board for this. Hold on. We're gonna use the board for like the first time ever, more or less. Okay, so you have, for example, your last common ancestor of all reptiles is this dot right here. And then you have two branches that go over here. This branch right here, this is the Archosaurs, okay? This branch right here is the Squamites. This branch right here, somewhere around there, gives you lizards. And over here, you get dinosaurs. So right here, since this is where lizards are, is where mosasaurs are, because mosasaurs are lizards. At no point is there any overlap between these two. After this point right up here, that is the last time lizards and dinosaurs share a common ancestor. So no, there are no aquatic dinosaurs. Mosasaurs are not dinosaurs. There you go. I hope that it kind of explained that a little bit. Like crocodilians, like Deinosuchus. Deinosuchus isn't a crocodilian anymore. It's a crocodiliform, because true crocodilians are like their own thing and stuff like that. It was once thought that Deinosuchus was an alligatorid. We talked about that a little bit beforehand, but yeah. Funny looking diagram. Hey, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But yeah, so Deinosuchus, I think like a paper not too long ago kind of reclassified it as a crocodiliform. Of course, modern crocodilians are crocodiliforms, but you know, modern crocodilians are like their further like subset of them. You slow down, I'm taking notes. Sorry, I get like really hyped up. I want to talk about this. Can you talk about Dryosaurus? I certainly can. Now, Dryosaurus is, I want to say, I'm pretty sure. Hold on. It is an ornithischian. Yep. Lived in, yeah, ornithischian dinosaurs. So there are two groups of dinosaurs. There is the Saurischians and the ornithischians. Saurischians, which means the lizard hip dinosaurs, give us things like the theropods and the sauropods. So your things like T-Rex and the long necks. Ornithischians, which means the lizard hip dinosaurs, give you literally everything else. If it is not a theropod, if it is not a sauropod, chances are it is an ornithischian. Say chances are because there's always exceptions with this weird stuff. Herrerasaurus, Eoraptor, they're just strange. But yeah, so Dryosaurus itself is a ornithischian. It is actually an ornithopod, which actually means that it is part of the lineage that would eventually give us hadrosaurs. It lived in the late Jurassic, about 155, possibly to 145 million years ago. So yeah, it's also like in certain dinosaur games, it's always depicted as like really small, but it's also about like the size of a raccoon. So yeah, arguably it is small, but it's not as small as things like, you know, modern birds and stuff like that. So it is a pretty sizable dinosaur in comparison to like modern stuff. Of course, back then it was probably the smallest thing around for a few miles. So yeah, really interesting. Are mosasaurs related to dinosaurs then? Very, 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 very distantly. Again, the last time dinosaurs and lizards shared a common ancestor was all the way back in, I want to say, the Permian. I want to I'll actually double check that right now. Ancestor between lizards and dinosaurs. It was approximately 260 million years ago. Reptiles first originate around 320 million years ago. So the last time dinosaurs, mosasaurs, and stuff like that shared a common ancestor was like 250 million years ago or somewhere around there. So yeah, long time. You talk about Therizinosaurus. What's your favorite dinosaur? Favorite dinosaur, and your streams are really delayed. The delay has to be there. I'm sorry. The delay has to be there because if something happens on stream, I need that delay to give me time to catch it and to like either mute or something like that. The delay has to be there. But Therizinosaurus is really interesting. We were talking about it a little bit beforehand. The claws probably weren't really used as weapons. They were probably used for utility to grab branches, bring them down, and additionally probably for display as well. But they do possess the largest claws of any animal to ever exist that we know of so far. Stealing that line, sorry, Lindsay Nicole. But interestingly enough, when paleontologists first found Therizinosaurus, most of what they found were its hands and claws. And they thought it was a turtle. So, take that as you will. That's actually why Therizinosaurus has the name that it does. Therizinosaurus, the genus name, that means scythe lizard, right? That's not out of the ordinary. You know what its species name is? Chelonformis. Guess what that means? Form of turtle. So it is forever labeled as form of turtle. So yeah. How do you know so much about dinosaurs? Autism. And also, like, I've been obsessed with these animals since, like, before I could create memories, so yeah, there you go. Also, my favorite dinosaur is Nanocosaurus huglundi, Alaskan Tyrannosaur from the late Cretaceous. Prince Creek Formation. But yeah. Bentley and 16 is Saturday. Are gonna miss in-person Dino class. Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. Man, yeah. I mean, like my family's getting together tomorrow for Thanksgiving because we have some relatives that are flying in into town to do that, and they don't come down here often. So yeah, I feel you. Talk about your favorite dinosaur. I can. We talked a little bit about it before, but I guess I should talk about the Prince Creek Formation itself. So, Nanooksaurus hoglundi, the name translates to Hoglund's polar bear reptile. It likely Nanooksaurus likely did not possess white coloration. Excuse me. Um, because yes, Alaska was very cold at the end of the Cretaceous. Yes, it did see snow. Yes, it was dark for 4 months out of the year because of how far north it was. However, at the time, Alaska was probably about as cold as it gets in like Wyoming. And yeah, Wyoming gets cold. It gets very cold in some winters. However, it's not as cold as it normally is up there in Alaska today. That's because generally the planet was a lot warmer back then. Now, so if it's not that cold, then you have a large amount of the year that doesn't have snow. So having white plumage doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What it was all year round was rocky. And the type of rocky terrain up there is a lot of mixtures of grays and whites and blacks, right? So there's a good chance that the coloration that you see of Nanooksaurus in Prehistoric Planet is far more accurate. Even though they took... okay, I will always be pressed about the Prehistoric Planet Nanooksaurus. You want to know why? Because they used the lower estimate for its size. The estimate that they used was based on the one fossil of Nanooksaurus that we have, which is part of the lower mandible. That individual has been proven to be a younger individual and not fully grown. And they used its... I'll always be pressed about that. I'm sorry. I'll always be upset about that. But yeah. Did all dinosaurs that lived in cold climates have feathers? Maybe. It's hard to say, because here's the thing. Living up there with Nanooksaurus are animals like Pachyrhinosaurus, Edmontosaurus, and stuff like that. Here's the thing. We have animals today that live in slightly colder areas than the Prince Creek Formation was. We have animals today that live in just slightly colder areas that don't have any outward appearance of fur or feathers. Could Nanooksaurus have been feathered? Yes. Could it have been non-feathered? Yes. So as of now, it's really hard to say. But most people will agree that if there is any dinosaur that possesses, if there is any large theropod that possesses feathers that isn't Eutyrannus, it would be Nanooksaurus. So yeah. Did you watch Game of Thrones? I'll give it a shot. Give us the big Nanooks. I know, that's exactly how I feel. Different dinosaurs cope with the 9 to 5 corporate environment? No way of knowing. If mosasaurs and dinosaurs are very distant relatives, does that mean we humans some aren't related? No. I feel like you have a very strong misunderstanding of how phylogenetics work. Earth animals, everything alive on this planet comes from a common ancestor. Everything on this planet is just a bunch of weird distant cousins. Everything. Even animals that are a part of the same species have very different genome sequences. They have enough to be a part of the same species, but we're all different on an individual basis. So, yeah. Gonna talk about Scorpius Rex? Well, that's not a real dinosaur, so I can't tell you anything real about it because, well, it's fictional. So, I guess if you want to know more about it, go watch Chaos Theory or Camp Cretaceous. I don't know. I'm not like a huge Jurassic World guy. Like, yeah, I like the franchise, but I'm not a lore buff about it. So sorry. How do we know the colors of dinosaurs were? Some dinosaurs have fossil evidence of it. Some dinosaurs, like Sinosauropteryx, were found with preserved coloration because that particular formation that it comes from is actually like really good at preserving small details. Other other times you have a fossil that is so well preserved that you can see the texture of its skin. And if you can, sometimes you can get super close to it and you can see, like with a microscope, you can see something called a melanosome. Now, we as humans, we have something called melanocytes. Melanocytes are skin cells that that use melanin to change the tone of your skin. Right? So if you have more melanin, you're darker. If you have less melanin, you're lighter. In dinosaurs, however, melanosomes can be different colors depending on the shape of the cell structure itself. So, if you have a dinosaur that is so well preserved that you have a melanosome, then you can look at its shape, compare it to modern animals that excuse me, that also use melanosomes, and you can figure out what color it is. This is how we know the color of the Sauropelta specimen. Was it Sauropelta? No, I think that was Boreapelta. Let me double check that, actually. I get those two confused all the time. Sauropelta. No, it was Boreapelta. Yes, Boreapelta. Yeah. So that one was found in like a Canadian quarry, and it was so well preserved that like we found out that it was a rusted red color, which is super neat. Yeah. Should I be worried about a dinosaur talking to me? Nah, you're good. All good. Yeah. There are stars coming down at the sky. You know what's so funny to me is that I think a lot of people have this misconception of the asteroid impact itself, because like realistically speaking, you don't see it until it's like a few weeks away. And when it's in the sky, it just kind of looks like everything else. Maybe it's moving a little faster than everything else, but like for an animal to look up into the sky and see that, they wouldn't know what it was, obviously, right? But when it makes impact, it's literally just boom, gone. Also, fun fact, it liquidated on impact. Like literally it hits the earth and then it just liquefies. That's why there's like we have the crater, but we don't have the asteroid because it liquefied. So yeah. Allosaurus. Yeah, Allosaurus is okay. Allosaurus is most notably known for being one of the most present theropods in the Morrison Formation. But I'll be honest with you, I highly doubt that was genuinely the case. Were Allosauruses abundant? Yes, I don't doubt that for a second, because we have a ton of fossils from these guys. However, it is worth noting the presence of preservation bias. There's a good chance that Allosaurus tended to live in areas that fossilized better compared to where other large carnivores were, like Ceratosaurus and Torvosaurus. It is a megalosaurid, so so those guys were probably in wetter areas, whereas Allosaurus was in drier climates. So there is some like fossil like preservation bias going on with that. So yeah, I mean, they were really cool. There's been some interesting takes recently about possibly Jimenense and Europaeus being refolded back into Fragilis. However, I haven't seen any studies on that. No one's come out with an opinion piece on it quite yet. Actually, there might have been a few people that did that. However, no official studies happened, so don't take that as like gospel. So yeah. Like, do we know what dinosaurs sound like? Some of them, yes. Some hadrosaurs, like Parasaurolophus, Corythosaurus, Lambeosaurus, we can get a good idea of what pitch they went at. We can't exactly get the right sound, but we can get, like, the kind of tone, right? For example, like, with those guys, it's kind of like blowing into a trumpet, right? You can blow into the trumpet and get a sound in a range of pitch. However, you'll never know exactly how the previous person who played that trumpet actually sounded because you weren't there when they played it. That's probably the best analogy I can get it. So yeah. Also, there was a nodosaur found with a syrinx not too long ago. So we know that much like modern birds, they had a syrinx, works a little differently than how we have things. We have something called a larynx. Ours works a little bit differently. I think theirs is mostly based on pitch and air going through the lungs, whereas ours works similarly, but we have the ability to manipulate it a bit more, I would say. Or I think. I might be a little off on that, unfortunately. But yeah. Do you think the government is hiding the T-Rex and aliens? No. T-Rex has, like, insanely good fossil preservation. We have, like, 50 plus specimens. Aliens, on the other hand, I've been getting really into, like, sci-fi universes and stuff like that, like Mass Effect recently. I'm gonna be honest. The ability to go faster than light and travel to distant stars is almost impossible. So I highly doubt there have been aliens on this planet. Anyway, sorry. The OSI Museum, they have a periskull reconstruction that you could blow in and make a sound. Exactly, right? Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's, again, like, you can get the pitch if you blow through it, but you can't exactly get the exact sound. Because there's a lot of stuff you can't account for with just the skull alone. You have the possibility that there is soft tissue and the internal structure of the skull when the animal was alive. Maybe it was, like, a bit more, like, there was more moisture in there. And listen, as someone who played the trumpet, I'll tell you right now, if you're blowing into a trumpet and there's like saliva in it because you got to clear it out every once in a while, it sounds different. You get a different sound from that. So yeah. Yeah. Let me. I am currently dressed as a Changosaurus. What is the strongest raptor? I guess theoretically you could say Utah Raptor. It is the biggest, heaviest, and the strongest. Or I guess. So I would give it to that. I mean, if you're just using raptor as a conventional term, there is obviously the Megaraptors. However, if you're using raptors to describe the Dromaeosaurids, then those aren't raptors. But yeah, let's say those guys. And let's see. Okay. Was T-Rex the biggest? It was T-Rex is the largest terrestrial land predator, or terrestrial land predator. Yeah, I'm really reinforcing that idea. T-Rex is the largest terrestrial carnivore to ever exist. It possesses the strongest bite force of any terrestrial predator to ever exist that we know of so far. Of course, its bite is outcompeted by things like Megalodon, but things in the ocean are like built insanely different than things on land. So, yeah. And what is your favorite depiction of Nanosaurus? I'm really glad you asked that. I really like the depiction from Dinosauria. However, I'm actually not a fan of like the polar bear all white depiction of it. I like coloration similar to this. You know, the more like browner, blackish colors, stuff like that. It makes the most amount of sense for me. So, yeah. And I do... Whoop. But yeah. Okay, we're going to do one more. What land dinosaur could beat T-Rex in a 1v1? Everyone says Spinosaurus, but that's not true. You want to know the real answer? Any sauropod. Just about any sauropod exceeding 10 tons. Or better yet, any animal that lived with it. Any animal that lived with T-Rex that is like equal or heavier to T-Rex. Denversaurus and Ankylosaurus, Edmontosaurus, Triceratops. These are known animals that will bring down Tyrannosaurus. Apatosaurus would bring it down. Brontosaurus, possibly a Camarasaurus, Brachy, any Titanosaur, realistically. These guys have high chances of bringing down a T-Rex. So, yeah. Similarities and differences of Yudi and Nanook besides location and period. Eutyrannus is a Proceratosaurid, obviously. The main difference is going to be skull shape, because we know Nanook is a Tyrannosaurine, and it's going to be the amount of fingers. Now, Eutyrannus, I believe, is longer based on current estimations. Now, again, you got to remember that the material we have for Eutyrannus is much more substantial than anything we have for Nanooksaurus at the moment, which is very unfortunate. But as of now, Nanooksaurus is possibly somewhere between 20 to 30 feet long. So, yeah. Okay. So, unfortunately, I do believe we are going to end it here. If I missed your question or didn't see it, I apologize. I'm only human. I know I'm a Changosaurus, but realistically, I can't get to all of you. If you would still like your question answered, you are more than welcome to go to the comments of my most recent video. You can join our community Discord, link in my bio. It is a little finicky. You might have to open the invite in a browser, and that should fix it. But yeah, thank you guys so very much for attending. Thank you everyone who liked, commented, shared, followed, and all that good stuff. And a very big special thank you to everyone who gifted. You guys are awesome. Thank you so very much. Love y'all. And of course, if you're joining us late, this will be going up almost immediately onto YouTube. Lakota 406 on YouTube. I basically have the same name everywhere. So, well, that being said and done, I will catch you guys later. I hope you guys have a great rest of y'all's weekend, and happy Thanksgiving to all of those celebrating. So, yeah, have a good one. Bye-bye!